Don't think healthcare professionals have any business experience? Think again. No topic is off limits as we share tales from our brave hosts who will always tell it like it is. We are #NoFilterHealthcare. Here to guide you through your healthcare journey are your hosts, Taylor Dunn and Tamara Donda. We want to thank our sponsor, Uptime Health, the leading healthcare equipment and compliance management software company, for bringing this podcast to fruition. Visit uptimehealth.com to learn more. Let's get started.
Welcome to #NoFilterHealthcare. I'm your co-host, Taylor Dunn.
And I'm your other co-host, Tamara Donda. And today we have our guest speaker, Dr. Hendrik Lai, who is the co-founder and principal consultant with Sage Dental Consulting.
We're so happy to have you here today, Hendrik. And I just want to start off by saying that every time I speak with you, I end up learning something new, and I'm always amazed. And so officially, I'm giving you the title as the most interesting man in dentistry. And I think you should get a contract with Dos Equis. So.
Well, I'll bring that endorsement to them. It's so great to be here, Taylor and Tamara.
Yeah, so all joking aside, I just, want to let our listeners have a little taste of what I'm talking about and have you give some information about your background and also how you started Sage Dental Consulting.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've had a fairly broad background over the years. My first career was as a clinician. I worked in multiple dental offices, started my own sort of practices, built them up, and then offloaded them to a DSO, and then went from that to working in a multidisciplinary healthcare organization. It's a multinational organization that did dental, medical, aeromedical evacuation, surgery, outbreak control, you name it, they did it. And I was in that capacity their senior dental officer as well as their quality management systems manager. So with that, I was responsible for creating systems, processes, and getting them certified to the ISO 9001 standard. Following that, I sort of had a stint in working with an organization called the Royal Flying Doctor Service, where we established something called the TOOTH program. So TOOTH stands for the Oral Outback Treatment and Health Program. And that was sort of to create a proof of concept model that we could work with private, public, and philanthropic organizations to provide oral health care to anyone, no matter where they were located, in a fly-in, fly-out basis, and using telehealth models. Following that, I became what I call one of the most hated men in dentistry. I became a C-suite executive at a dental insurance company. So have a fairly good sort of background and understanding of payer-provider relations, not just from the provider side during my time as a provider, but also from the payer side, and understanding that global worldview that payers have when they look at the sort of aggregate models that they have across industries. Following that, I went back and got a few business degrees and then started doing general management consulting. So I sort of work in the area of dental, medical, health and beauty, oil and gas exploration, aerospace technology, and manufacturing. And after doing that for a few years, I got an appointment from the governor of Wisconsin to sort of be involved in something called the Health Development Council, which sort of is involved in some of the health policy steering and direction for the state of Wisconsin. And that sort of brought me back to Wisconsin. And during that transition, I decided to pivot my consulting business to focus more on the dental space, where I first started. So going full circle. So working with startups, group practices, emerging DSOs, mid-cap DSOs, dental tech, and dental adjunct industries like dental temping and dental recruitment. So,
well, all I can say is wow. And I feel like I've got a lot of work to do to even compare. I'm like, oh my gosh, what a background. That's amazing.
Oh, thank you.
Well, with that background, it's safe to say you're an impressive individual that truly understands the world of dentistry and how to improve not only the business side, but the patient experience as well. And so, one of the first things I thought of is I'd like to know, with your experience, you've seen the best and worst scenarios when you're working with a new client. So tell us, with that hashtag no filter lens, what is one of the most difficult scenarios you've come across when working with a dental office, and why?
Yeah, for sure. That's a really interesting point there. And I think this is not like isolated to a dental office. I actually see this very, very broadly across not just dentistry, but industries more broadly than that. That people, there's a saying in business: ultimately, you live or die by the quality of your decisions. And what they teach in the military is that the best decision is a good decision, the next best decision is a bad decision, the worst decision is no decision. So one of the things that I tend to find in dental offices is that the leadership in a lot of dental offices take a long time to make a decision because they're afraid of making the wrong decision. And ultimately, there's no wrong decision, but the worst decision is not making the decision. So, one of the things that I always encourage my clients to read is Sun Tzu's The Art of War. And one of the things that he speaks about is, not to say that everything is about war, but he talks about speed being the essence of war. So, ultimately it's about making decisions fast and then correcting those decisions quickly as well. So I had a client who had a dental assistant who just was constantly disappearing. No one could find her. She was just randomly unfindable. And this had been going on for months and months and months. And eventually, we got to a point where, where was this particular dental assistant? And, we searched high and low. We searched the basement. We searched, this was a multi-floor dental office that we were at. Could not find her. Eventually, somebody looked out the window and she was in the car park. And I thought, well, this is a weird situation. Okay. And then 2 minutes later, police cars came out of everywhere, just like probably half a dozen police cars. And as it turns out, she was selling drugs in the car park of the dental office. So, the point behind this is that why wasn't anybody saying anything and making the disciplinary decision to sort of say, what are you doing? Where are you going? Rather than letting it get to a point where, police are coming, you got police dogs, canine units up and down the dental office, seeing if there are any drugs in the dental office, anything like that. So, the point is, be willing to make a decision, whether it's a bad decision, it doesn't matter. You can always course correct, but the worst decision is just not making a decision at all.
Wow. I've never heard of anything like that. That's crazy, but it makes your point completely. I mean, you sat around and now look at what the reputation for that dental office is because of that scenario, and it's going to impact your business even if you had nothing to do with it. So
yeah, and once you're on the radar, you're on the radar.
Right.
Well, speaking of reputation, I have to tell you, Hendrik, I Googled you. And one of the first articles from ABC News came up with the headline, "Flying Dentist Tackles Outback Health Crisis." And I thought, oh my gosh, this guy is everywhere. And I know that your photo was like the main, photo in the page. And it just seems like you accomplished everything. And I really want to know, how you kind of transitioned from being active in the field, right, and into this consulting business and improving patient outcomes in this way.
Absolutely. And I guess, because we're no filter, I'll say some things which may not be popular, but my transition was always planned. I'd never planned to be a clinician for my entire life, and one of the things I've always considered is that dentistry it's ultimately a trade. We rely on our hands and our eyes to make a living. We're trading time for money. Just like an electrician, just like a plumber. This is why you don't see 85-year-old plumbers and electricians. Your body just can't handle it. And I was taught by my mentor. I actually remember him saying, he was actually an anesthesiologist. He said to me, "Oh, it's great, Hendrik. Now you've graduated. You're a doctor. Now you got to figure out how you're going to stop being a doctor." So it was always a planned transition to sort of move away from clinical wet finger dentistry. And I'd always been a big believer, though, that in the most successful people don't have a depth of experience. they have a breadth of experience. Now, what that allows people to do is that it allows people to transition and have the ability to adapt and have learning agility to different kinds of situations. And that's one of the reasons I sort of put myself into different different situations, be that in a philanthropic context where we develop programs and develop sort of proof of concept models, be that in a corporate context, be that in an academic context where I was teaching healthcare economics and oral surgery. But just putting yourself in as many contexts to create as big a breadth of experience as you possibly can, because that's what ultimately leads to success. It's one of the most dangerous things I tend to find, and this is something I see in dentistry, is that dentists like to hire people with a ton of experience that have been in a dental practice for 15 years and have done the same thing. And if you believe in that 10,000 hour rule, so 10,000 hours to achieve some expertise in a given context, in a given situation, 10,000 hours is roughly equivalent to 3.5 years of full-time work. Now, what that means is that somebody who's been in a dental office doing the same thing for 15 years is just repeating the same experience 5 times over. So they've got a great depth of experience in that particular context, but bring them out of that context and they struggle to adapt to a new context and be able to apply those learnings and experiences they've had to their new environment. So I actually like to see, and again, a very unpopular situation, I like to see people that have hopped around, every 3 to 4 years, because that tells me that they've developed mastery within their context, and then they've moved on to a new context to improve their breadth and their scope of learning. So
I've actually seen that concept, just from personal experience. A lot of my friends, they always end up moving to a new role, a new company after about 2 years, because they realize that, they've done what they needed to, and it has nothing to do with the company, but just to expand their knowledge and, what they can learn from different situations, different models of business, things
absolutely.
like that.
And then that's something that, businesses, dental offices, for example, can really actually leverage, knowing that, people develop mastery and develop expertise after about 10,000 hours. They can embark on things, an expansion of roles where people, not only work within what they were hired to do initially, but they expand their skills and their experience on a project basis, or perhaps, move into additional roles to, again, change that context to restart that 10,000 hours of mastery again. So, and that's a great way that dental offices can implement learnings as a part of a retention tool.
Yeah. So speaking of retention, I know that's one of the most commonly, discussed topics, right, with dental offices specifically, is how do we keep patients and how do we acquire new patients? So I know that you have a service offering called Practice Bounce Back, where they are potentially in a detrimental situation of acquiring patients. What do you do first when you're tackling, somebody that's going through that?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question, Tamara. Now, one of the things that I like to do is I actually like to start from the beginning. Now, when I say from the beginning, what I mean is that I'm a big believer that, people talk about vision and mission and strategy and tactics and operations. But in my experience, a lot of dental offices really don't have a very clear strategy. They're very good at operations, they're very good at management, and, typically their leadership is a little bit sort of mediocre and lackluster and lacking direction. So I'm a big believer that we got to start with vision. I'm not a person that believes in these, like 5-sentence vision statements and 5-sentence mission statements. I'm a very clear believer that, your vision statement is simply, this is what we want to be, and this is what we want to be as our North Star. And then our mission statement is, this is what we do and who we do it for. Simple, because we want our staff to actually be able to say, this is what our mission is, this is what our vision is. So ultimately, vision gives rise to mission gives rise to strategy gives rise to tactics gives rise to operations. And what we tend to find is that, people talk about strategy, especially in the dental context, but really what they're talking about is tactics and operations. Now, we're very good at knowing how to do things right. We're not necessarily great at knowing what the right thing to do is. So we're very, very good at managing and sort of taking checklists and ticking things off and actually, doing the technical things. And that's what dentists do, right? They know that, when I do a filling, I do my local anesthetic, I do my rubber dam, I do my cavity prep, etch, prime, bond, and put my filling in, adjust occlusion. There's a process. We're very good at managing processes, not necessarily being great at sort of knowing what we need to do. So we do things right. We don't always do the right thing. So it's what I like to start with is a strategy, and ultimately there are only like 3 or 4 generic strategies you can have. You can be a cost leader, you can be focused, you can be differentiated, and then some permutation of those. So not a lot of options. But what I tend to find is that a lot of dental offices, they try to be everything to everybody. And then you become what I call seers. You get sort of squeezed in the middle, and we all know what happened to seers, right? They sort of not really around anymore. So when you get squeezed in the middle, your customers either gravitate to the top, so they gravitate to a differentiated offering, or they gravitate to the bottom. They gravitate to the cost leader, the cheapest person in the or the cheapest option in the industry. So now that's what I like to start with. I like to start with actually strategy, because without the strategy, we don't really know where we're going. And again, if you think about Sun Tzu's Art of War, what he says is that strategy without tactics is the longest route to victory, but tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. So without that strategy, ultimately all is lost. Dentistry has been very lucky in that even without strategy and even without a sound tactical base, you can still be profitable. And that's because of the presence of different isolating mechanisms like, high regulatory hurdles, high barriers to entry, and a whole bunch of other, isolating mechanisms which are in place. But what we're seeing is that the environment's beginning to change around that. So, for example, some of the regulatory hurdles are beginning to fall. A really good example is recently Alabama and Georgia. Some of the teledental platforms began to win lawsuits against the dental boards, and more so than that, the teledental platforms were supported by the Department of Justice and the Federal Trade Commission. So not only are they sort of winning, but they're also getting that kind of federal endorsement. And once a precedent's been set, obviously that begins to roll forward. So we're beginning to see some of these isolating mechanisms come down, and it's really understanding the business environment in which you're working and how to strategize and achieve the most valuable competitive position within that. And then once you've got your strategy set, you can develop tactical plans to support that strategy. And then once you've got those tactical plans, you can develop operations to support the tactics. So a really good example would be, if you decide that I want to be the differentiated practice, and I want to be able to offer the best kind of care to my patients. I want to be a high tech, high touch, high expertise practice, and that's your generic strategy, and that's good. But if your tactics involve hiring people at $13 an hour, if you want to buy all of your equipment from eBay or from some sort of gray market, those kind of operational decisions don't support that strategy, and that can lead to confusion, not only with your staff but also with your patients. And as I say in marketing, a confused customer becomes somebody else's customer. So everything's got to be aligned and supportive of each other.
Absolutely. And I think the idea of being proactive versus reactive is really important here too. And having those tactical, methods that you have in place allow you to be more proactive, which I really think is great for dental offices.
Absolutely. And then there's a whole toolkit that can be used in order to achieve some of these things. And, these are like SWOT analysis, TOES analysis, Porterian analysis. There's strategy mapping. There's a whole bunch of things that I would put in place to help determine what the most valuable competitive position within a specific marketplace would look like. And then how do you sort of leverage that particular position by, using things like removal of duplication. You want to use things like, niche marketing, brand expansion, reduction of input costs, a whole bunch of very boring economic things. And that's what happens to happen behind the curtain. It's the man behind the curtain pulling the levers, but it's nonetheless what's important. It's creating those systems and processes to support those things. I have a lot of clients that, tell me, Hendrik, I'm so disappointed. People don't, my staff don't really understand my vision. And I tell my clients this is that, we don't rise to the level of our vision. We fall to the level of our processes and systems. So we need to make sure we have appropriate processes and systems so that we don't fall too far.
Right. There's so many companies and industry leaders that have had the great vision, but never had the system or the process to make sure that it was successful. So I know we're all very aware of all of those.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think the most important part of all of the success that you've had is that you're actually taking it and putting it into a way that your clients can benefit from it as well. So I think that the processes that you're putting in place, you're just helping the industry as a whole. And I think anyone is lucky to work with you. So if you'd like to learn more about Sage Dental Consulting, you can visit sagedentalconsulting.com. So happy to have you today, Hendrik, on our episode. And I also am excited to say that you are now a new partner of Uptime Health. So there's some opportunity there as well. So don't forget to check that out on our website. And please subscribe to our podcast. Let us know if you have any questions in the comments below. But thank you again, Hendrik. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate being here.